Representative Becca Balint, a Democrat representing the entire massive state of Vermont. She serves on the House Judiciary Committee and House Budget Committee. First woman and openly LGBT person to serve to represent Vermont in Congress. Representative Balint, nice to see you.
Oh, nice to see you, Dean.
By the way, was Kash Patel before Judiciary today?
Yes.
He was, because I saw Hank Johnson
Can
clip.
you see how tired and haggard I look? Yes, we've had hours of Kash Patel.
What is just what can you share about it? What's the vibe like in the room with Kash Patel?
It's dark. I feel like there's a dark shroud all over everybody. It's just he gives off a kind of a very dark vibe. Look, the man is not interested in answering any questions at all, right? He treats us with such hostility, and it's literally our jobs to have oversight over the FBI, the CIA, all of these parts of government. And I don't know if you saw the clips from the Senate hearing yesterday, but it was just right. It just devolved into these either horrible shouting matches or literally deflecting, even when they had direct quotes, right? He's like, well,
Right.
I don't recall saying that. It's like, here's the quote. Here, he's like, I don't know the context. It's like,
I,
you know,
I thought I saw with Hank Johnson was asking about, do you own a Chinese company? And Patel's like, I don't own shares. I don't think so. And then Hank gives the name, Congressman Johnson gives the name, and he goes, well, that company's based in Singapore. So he knew exactly what was going on. Because then he goes, well, they moved their headquarters recently to Taiwan. I'm like, you are a shifty son of a gun,
he
aren't you?
is. He
And
is
but the
very
Epstein
shifty.
files, he was pounded yesterday and today especially. The House is always a little more visceral on both
Yes.
sides, right? So you get
Yes.
so what can you share about? I saw Representative Raskin said you even call for the files to be released,
That's
saying the
right.
only reason they're not is because there's names in there. So what's going on? What are the names?
Exactly. So you heard it from Raskin. You heard it from Jayapal, who was also talking. She just wanted to get a commitment from him. Look, the victims would like to be able to sit down with you. You have people from the DOJ who are sitting down with Ghislaine Maxwell, a convicted trafficker,
Mhm.
and you won't sit with the victims. And so she pounded hard on that. He tried to get into a legal argument with Dan Goldstein. I mean,
Yeah,
Goldman, excuse me,
yeah,
Dan
I
Goldman.
saw it.
And Goldman's like, I don't know if you caught it. He's like, I was a real prosecutor for 10 years. Look, it is, of course, the height of hypocrisy. And it is so transparent that all he's doing is protecting Trump, right? He's protecting Trump because if he protects Trump, he protects his own job.
Right.
And so it's as craven and as crass as that. And I was saying to my team this morning, when you see the way that he operates, like Kash Patel believes he's a freedom fighter. Like that is the narrative about himself. Like he is a
Right.
truth teller, a freedom fighter. He's all about transparency. And you can tell that it's actually really killing him that he has made this commitment essentially to Trump to not do the thing that he promised that he would do, which was release all the files. And so yeah, we were making him squirm. He was definitely in the hot seat there. And my line of questions was not on Epstein because I knew a lot of people would be asking about that. I was asking about the response that we've seen both from the White House, from members of Congress, and also from the FBI as it relates to the Charlie Kirk assassination versus the assassination of Melissa Hortman in Minnesota.
Mhm.
And my team was able to look back and see that after the Hortman killing, there were some very sort of short, perfunctory texts coming out from the FBI, both the main FBI accounts and regional, just saying this was, a horrific attack. Violence isn't, the answer, that kind of thing. So four tweets total, and then related to Charlie Kirk's assassination, 51. Okay.
Wow.
And I said, there are a lot of Americans who feel like you are taking some deaths more seriously than others. And you are also not um, doing the work of trying to bring people back together. You're telling me you go where the facts take you on these killings, and yet you have a boss right now who is literally fanning the flames of violence and dissension, and will not even admit when when the press was pressing him on Melissa Hortman. First he said, well, I don't even know who that is. I don't know what you're talking about. And then said this nonsense that, the Governor Walz should have called him if he wanted the flags at half mast, where we know from the quotes immediately after the killing, he had said, well, I'm not going to call Walz. That's a waste of my time.
And he demeaned Walz as well.
He demeaned Walz. And so there are so many ways in which Kash Patel is not qualified for the job that he has. We see this is this is an ongoing theme of this administration, but it's also a level of incompetence that will, I believe, absolutely impact our national security, because they have diverted all of these agents away from doing other incredibly important jobs to secure the safety of the homeland. They've diverted it all towards immigration enforcement, which was not their charge. And they've also let go of many agents who are in charge of going after traffickers, right? Traffickers of children, white collar criminals. And so it's very disturbing when you call somebody before the committee. And again, Democrats didn't get to call him, right? That was Jordan. Jordan called him there to answer questions. And he will not give the American people the answer. So, you can get mad at us, you can yell at us, but the contempt he shows for us is just a contempt he shows for the taxpayers who fund the Bureau, who are actually entitled to all of these answers.
Absolutely. And Shadow Representative Becca Balint, are you concerned now with the language of Donald Trump's administration, J.D. Vance and Stephen Miller, that they're going to now try to use the horrible death of Charlie Kirk and try to weaponize it to go after all different Democratic organizations to investigate and shut them down?
No question. No question. That's exactly what they're planning to do. And they have the assistance of many of my Republican colleagues in Congress, who all of these supposed free speech champions right now are being absolute speech police right now, and are trying to get anyone fired. They're trying to censor people, anyone who says something about Charlie Kirk that they don't like. That is not a free speech champion. And Charlie Kirk himself, I think, would be disturbed by what he's hearing from some of his colleagues and from Pam Bondi saying, essentially, we're going to get to determine what speech is protected under the First Amendment. No, it's all protected. It's protected, whether you like the guy or not. And it's interesting to see them once again twist themselves into knots over this. And let me just be clear. I categorically, unequivocally have denounced this violence, the attacks on the president. It doesn't matter to me who's committing it from what side of the aisle and who is the victim. It is absolutely wrong. And the fact that many of my colleagues on the other side will only decry it when it's a Republican who's being attacked, that tells you that there's a lot of rot around this issue. And it's very disturbing.
Yesterday, I went through on the show all the Republican office holders, from J.D. Vance, Stephen Miller, Nancy Mace, Senator Blackburn, and others, openly demanding that people be fired and lose their jobs if they say anything that deviates from what they want you to say about Charlie Kirk. And the problem for me is that I don't think it ends there. I think this is the beginning of their new word police, thought police.
Yes.
You have to do everything they say. If you deviate, they're coming from you. And right now, I read for people on air yesterday how fascist movements in the past had sacralized or made sacred their fallen heroes. They're doing that with Charlie Kirk. So if you say anything it's like you're saying about some sacred fixture, you can't do anything about it. He is above that. How dare you? And then you can justify a lot when that happens, when you get in your mind that person's sacred.
Right. And as I would say, sorry, your authoritarianism is showing once again. I mean, it is, and when you walk around the halls now, Dean, I don't know if you've been up to the hill since his murder.
No, I haven't been there in a long time.
So they're now putting these giant posters of Charlie Kirk outside of their offices.
Wow.
And it is about making him almost sainthood at this point in the
Yeah.
way that they're talking about him. And they're going to make us vote on a resolution on the floor later today to get all of us to praise who he was and his work. Okay. It's not just a condemnation of the violence. If it were a resolution, even if they didn't include Melissa Hortman, which they need to, and Paul Pelosi, and the firebombing of Governor Shapiro's house, all of these things, even if they didn't do that, it was just a straight up or down, we condemn the assassination of Charlie Kirk. You would get, I believe, 100% of the House of Representatives condemning violence. But no, they can't ever do that. So what they're doing is they're trying to deify him. And
Yep.
then, of course, we're not going to be part of that. And then we will be characterized as the radical left who doesn't care about this assassination. So it's sick and twisted how much time they spend trying to set us up in these snares. And as to your point, it's all about thought policing, and this from people who are always talking about the snowflakes, people talking about cancel culture. I mean,
Yeah.
these guys are
Always
leading on
there.
they're leading with cancel culture right now. That is the, you had me at hello. That's what they're doing.
They had, and Brendan Carr, the FCC chair, and there was just news a short time ago before we started that he was on Benny Johnson's podcast, which that podcast came up today in your hearings.
Yes.
And he said that Jimmy Kimmel must be either disciplined by ABC or we're going to investigate them because he insinuated that maybe Charlie Kirk was a MAGA person. This is where we are. They're wordsmithing it to like, he didn't say it, he insinuated it. And
It's
Brendan
so
Carr
dangerous.
at the government, right? We're in a really precarious place.
Dean, that is so, so dangerous. And the president saying to that reporter yesterday morning,
Jonathan Carl. Yeah.
yeah, maybe we should be going after you,
Well,
right?
really went
That's
after ABC. They paid him the ransom and he still comes
that's
after them. He
that's
doesn't.
exactly it. I mean, and that's, Dean, that is what I say to organizations who will say to me, well, what are we supposed to do? Like, we're over a barrel here. I was like, you guys, you think you're gonna buy him off? You're not gonna buy him off.
No.
He's going to take your money and then he's going to screw you over anyway. Like, we all know this. We have so much evidence.
It's not like, right, the mafia, it's not like you pay them once protection
No,
money and they never come back. Once you
exactly.
pay a little, they know you're going to pay. They're going to keep ratcheting it up.
And somehow they all think they're the special one.
Mm.
Like, he's going to make an exception for me or for our organization, right? And so, there's no hack, right? We're in the era of hacks. What's the hack for this, right? What's the
Right, right.
three-step plan? There's no hack for this. You got to stand up to
Mhm.
these authoritarian impulses whenever we see them. And the fact that, as you're saying, they're picking apart an insinuation. And again, are these the free speech warriors? I don't think so.
Oh no, they're the oppression warriors. There's no
They
doubt
are.
about that. I'm trying to represent
Yeah.
Becca Balint. Shift gears. I want to touch on an op-ed that you wrote
Yeah.
today. That I think it came out today. I read it today. I should put it that way.
Yeah.
You wrote about, I believe the Israeli government is committing a genocide against the Palestinian people, and
Yeah.
you cite studies. The UN on Monday, or was
Yeah.
it yesterday, came out and said it was
Yes.
a genocide. I believe it was Monday. Every day's a blur now. I mean, life's a blur.
Yes.
The irony is the UN says it's a genocide, and the guy who's the leader of that genocidal movement gets to stand in the UN
Yeah.
next week and gives a speech. So how did you get to the conclusion? And I know that you're proudly Jewish, and you talk about in the article, family members killed in the Holocaust, but now you're saying the Israeli government's involved in a genocide.
This has been coming. It's been a long time in coming. I think it is a very painful realization for us to come to. Those of us who have for a long time cared deeply about having a safe home for the Jewish people. Obviously Israel is the only Jewish state in the world, and certainly all of the horrific suffering that happened in Europe during the Holocaust. It is just emotionally, mentally difficult, I think, for a lot of people who have that background to admit that Israel may be perpetrating a genocide on another group of people. It's just it's the emotional weight of that is significant. And I think it's been important for me in earnest over the last few months to really dig into the details and to listen to the people on the ground who are in those service organizations, to listen to someone like McCain, whose first name is escaping me,
Cindy McCain.
Cindy McCain. She was on the talk shows over the weekend a couple weeks ago that really touched me.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, look, kids are being starved to death. We're facing famine. There is an incredible need for humanitarian aid, and it's systematically being prevented from getting in. And when you look at the number of healthcare facilities that have been destroyed, when you look at the water and the sewer, it just gets to a point where when you're looking at all of the facts on the ground, it's very difficult to come to any other conclusion except that it's intentional. And of course, you've got extremists within the Israeli government that refer to Palestinians in language that is referring to them as animals, and that they're not shy about telling everyone that their plan is to once again take over Gaza and the West Bank and absorb that land. And I just couldn't stay silent anymore. But it's very difficult.
I understand.
It's a very painful conclusion to come to. But I'm really hoping in my saying that, given my family's Holocaust history, that it will give space to other people who are also wrestling with this. And even if you can't say the word genocide, I mean, there's a paragraph in there that I really wanted to include. It's just like, for me, putting it out there, I had to speak my truth, what I had come to based on the evidence that I've seen. Not an easy conclusion, but I think it's the right one. But for me, I don't want this to be the litmus test for people in Congress, whether they're willing to make changes in policy towards this government, because that's what we need, right? To
Right,
your
exactly.
point, we need a change in policy. You know, if you can't say the word genocide and you say everything around it, and what you're voting on the floor is block the bombs, right? That's the one that we're pushing right now, is preventing more offensive weapons to go there. If you are denouncing, you know, this further incursion into Gaza that's happening this week, if you are making, you know, the statement that you can make with an open heart and full-throated denunciation of what's happening, and then match that with a policy change, then I want you on my team. I did not put this out thinking that you got to say this word or else you're not working towards this. And I think we get sometimes caught up in that. And I just want partners. And we had a number of people in our progressive caucus meeting the other day when we were trying to decide whether we were going to endorse the block the bombs legislation that I had already signed on to. And Sarah Jacobs was one of the co-leads on that with Delia Ramirez. We made the pitch. There were a lot of people in that room afterwards who said, I'm really glad we're taking this step because it's uncomfortable for me in my district to make that statement yet about genocide, but I can sign on to this. And that can be the next step. And we need that. Like, it's a lot of this work is about opening up space for other people to find the path, because whatever you do in Congress, there are going to be people absolutely furious with you, you know, and demanding your head. And so I think if we can give people that space to get policy change, because that's what we want, because the suffering is horrific. And I'll just tell you, I had a member from a more purple district than mine. She came up to me on the floor the other day and she said, I'm gonna sign on to block the bombs. Like, I feel like I need to do this. I know some of my constituents are going to be so angry with me. She said, but I know it's the right thing. And I said, it is the right thing. And I said, I also want you to know, you know, I'm shopping around this op-ed and I'm going to say that it's a genocide. And I could see, she said, she looked at me and she said, oh, it is a genocide, isn't it? It is.
Well,
Like you're willing to say that,
right.
that gives me the permission to be honest about what's
No,
happening here.
yeah, I mean, I've had experts on, Professor Omar Barta from Brown, who's Israeli,
Yeah.
and he also made a great point. I mean, he's a Holocaust and genocide studies. They're not the same. You have some people saying "No, it's not a Holocaust, it's a genocide. It's the erasure of a people. I
Yeah.
read a lot of the UN report that came out. The goal is to erase the Palestinian people. And Smotrich in the
Yes.
Israeli government just said we're going to erase any idea of a Palestinian state when there's his new idea for settlement expansion, which they approved. That's not new. The idea of erasing Palestinians
No,
in a big thing for a long time. And these guys just happen to say it, articulate it out loud, and now it's being used against them in the UN because they're finding genocidal intent through their words.
that's right. Exactly. And so, and
So
that
different.
is, and another piece of it, I think, for some of my colleagues that are having, some of my colleagues who are within the Jewish caucus, I know how painful it is.
Sure.
I do. And I know that you are hearing a lot of anguished people begging you not to call it a genocide because what it means for them emotionally, historically, they don't want to feel like it's negating, what happened with the 6 million, of course, but it is brave people like Professor Bartok. There are other organizations within Israel
Yeah.
who in the last few weeks have said, no,
Mhm.
come on, like every indication that we have is that this is intentional and systematic. And
I'll send you after we're done. I'll send a link to your team. I've had numerous doctors on who were in Gaza. One
yes.
who was on recently, he was a U.S. like major, and he worked on Tammy Duckworth in Iraq when her helicopter went down. He
Oh,
saved her
wow.
life. He said he's been in other war zones. He said nothing is as horrible as Gaza. And I said, why? I said, all the children with the one bullet wound to their head. And he said, those were snipers and they were done. And I said, how do you know they were done by Israelis? He said, the family said the person who shot them was on a tank or in a helicopter.
Yeah.
It's target practice with children. This is really happening. It's happening on our watch in the world. And the language of some of the Israeli soldiers on social media have now come back to haunt them as well because you put it all together and it's undeniable. And
Yes.
I've talked to doctors who clearly years of their lives are gone from the horrors they've seen there. Like it is that traumatic, like
Yes.
unlike anything they've ever seen. It's very hard to have this conversation with them too, to be
Yeah.
honest. Like they
Yeah.
relive it when you talk to them.
And when you talk to anyone who's doing medical procedures in Gaza right now, I remember speaking when I traveled to the West Bank. I guess that was last year. Everything runs together, but
It's a blur, I know.
we were able to meet with folks who had been in Gaza, and they said we are literally doing cesarean sections without anesthesia, right? And like for me, as a mom, as someone who's been through that in a hospital, like that, for me, I felt like I have to do more research. I have to go to those places. I have to look at the information and the fact, even though it's incredibly painful to do that, because it is our responsibility and it's on our watch and it needs to stop. It absolutely needs to stop.
I agree. Well, Representative Balint, I wish we had more time. We're running out of
Yeah,
time.
always.
It was great chatting with you. Your op-eds out today. Keep the good fight against Cash Patel.
Yes, thank you.
Keep
And
fighting.
let it be known, the first original Deniac, okay?
That's it. Representative Balint, the original Deniac. So whatever starts as a movement, this is where it began, folks. Let the historians note this is what the day.
That's right. This is
Thanks,
the day.
Representative.